This webinar is about navigating the customs border between Europe and the UK. And if the slide would change. Okay, I have to do it like that, fine. So today I'm joined by Ellie Hansen, who's our EPR program lead here at AVASK.
Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all okay. Thank you very much for joining us. As Freddie said, my name's Ellie Hansen. I lead the EPR department here at AVASK. So we assist sellers in approaching new environmental legislations and helping you stay compliant.
Brilliant. And we're also joined by Luke, who's our contact at DHL.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So yeah, my name's Luke. I've been with the group for about 10 years. I work for the Deutsche Post DHL group, and my role within the business is supporting our key accounts and some key sort of commercial decisions to help customers ship cross-border well. Thank you.
Yeah. Not to worry. So yeah, if we maybe go over the agenda of this webinar, just as a brief overview as to what happened previously during Brexit and what to expect now, talking about VAT and the changes within, and OSS and IOSS, the customs declarations, and then also the brief overview as to how DHL operates, and talking about from a UK's perspective importing into Europe and what a successful import might look like, and also the other way around, and any additional requirements you as a seller could maybe face. We then will talk about the extended producer responsibility, which Ellie will talk about, which just tackles questions about environmental tax, followed by a Q&A session at the end. Brilliant. So since the 1st of January 2021, the customs border between the EU and UK has been introduced. What this means is that between the UK and the EU, you now have to complete an import as well as an export declaration. If you're looking to move inventory, there might be some additional requirements that you would face. So moving inventory, meaning that you remain the sole owner of your products. And then, for instance, if you're a UK-based company wanting to move your inventory into Europe, but we'll talk about that in more detail later on. Additionally to that, import duty and import VAT, that has now been addressed. That import duty, if your goods are manufactured in Europe or in the UK and you're looking to transport between the two, you might not have to pay for that, and import VAT could be deferred, and we'll also be talking about different possibilities there for you. The trade deal. Yeah, so we're talking about import duty. We've briefly touched upon that already, but more specifically, what some sellers might face is a requirement for this REX number. Now, you can get this at your local Chamber of Commerce, but this generally applies for movements of inventory from Europe to the UK. This is so that the tax authorities have got more sort of, they're able to track your goods going over, and you provide additional proof that your goods originate from Europe. And this would only apply for goods that are manufactured in Europe. This way you can ensure that your goods have zero duty rates. Current EU VAT registration requirements. As you may know, if you're looking to import into Europe or into the UK, you now are required to hold a VAT number at the point of import. This is due to the fact that you're now having to be VAT registered in all countries that you're storing in. There's a slight different agreement towards sales, but we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later on. But for each country that you're looking to store in actively, you would need a VAT registration. So there's been this abolishment of a threshold. The main OSS changes So previously there was this MOSS registration, the mini one-stop shop. What this tackled is for all B2C businesses or the electronic services. So if you're selling key cards, anything like that, or online courses. This has been extended to actual services and products, sorry. So if you're looking to sell products outside of your VAT registered country, you now need to hold an OSS registration if your online marketplace doesn't collect and remit those sales. But we'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on as well. What this essentially allows you to do is have a single filing system for all of your sales committed outside of this VAT registered country. This allows you to sort of stop having to be VAT registered in all countries if you're not looking to store in those. The new role of OMPs. So if you operate under an online marketplace, they will now have to collect and remit these VAT sales or VAT to the local tax authorities. What this means is if you sell on places such as Amazon, Amazon will collect and remit all of your VAT liability that you've created, and also collect all the VAT that you are due to, that you are capable of collecting. And they will pay also VAT that is due to the local tax authorities. So that sort of saves you from having to get an OSS registration if you don't operate under any different services. So if you sell on your online website, you will still need to be OSS registered, as there is no marketplace that would collect these for you. But if you operate on maybe, let's say Amazon or eBay, they would collect these for you. This might raise the question as to what an OMP is. And there are three distinct characteristics that can define an online marketplace. And generally speaking, these marketplaces would deliver your goods for you. You are able to conduct the sale on their website, and in general, they set the terms of the sale as well. So those are the three sort of main categories I would look at to distinguish it, whether or not it is an online marketplace, and maybe if it's worth also expanding into one. So you might think, why would I need an OSS registration? And just to sort of round up quickly about OSS, if you've got a VAT registration in the EU, for instance, and you're looking to sell through whole of Europe, but you can't afford, or it doesn't make sense for you to store in all different European countries, then what you can do is get this single registration and have all of your distant sales, distant meaning not VAT registered countries, sort of filed on this one OSS registration. In places such as Amazon, however, this would mean that you're not prime eligible in those countries that you're distantly selling to. It would only be in the VAT registered countries. Furthermore, declaring all cross-border sales, we've spoken about that already. So I think that gives a bit of a clear picture of what OSS means for a seller. If maybe you'd like to take over, and if you want to tell me when you would like to swap slides, and if you give a brief overview about DHL, that would be great.
Sure. Next slide. Cool. So so like I said, my name's Luke, and I've been working for the Deutsche Post DHL group for quite some time. So DHL is the largest logistics company in the world. We're also the second largest postal network in the world, and the biggest in Europe. And obviously for cross-border and international trade is our key focus. And that it's been very, very difficult in the last 2 years, making sure that all our customers have the right information for their business model. And within logistics, every kind of business model is very unique. It's like a fingerprint in terms of how they trade and transact with their customers with the certain types of goods they are sending, whether it's on a marketplace or B2C, direct to consumer. It makes things look quite complex when a customer's trying to understand are they compliant? Are they shipping it the right way? And is it the best for the customer experience? So I'll start off by saying a little bit about the Deutsche Post DHL group. So a lot of our people in our business, we have about 500,000 employees worldwide. And a lot of them people don't understand the full extent of our business because we are a very big company. So we're known as the Deutsche Post DHL group, listed in Germany. And within that group, we've got a very simple diagram here, which shows you the main divisions within the Deutsche Post DHL group. So starting with the post and parcel side, which is Deutsche Post, also known as the PEP group. And this is the DHL parcel domestic within the Netherlands, Sweden, Denmark, and of course, Germany. This is the sort of up to 31 kilos service across Europe for B2B2C deliveries, which is only really present within the EU to access that service. And of course, Deutsche Post, where we are very much global across Europe as well. I work for the Deutsche Post division within the UK, representing the UK side, and we're sort of e-commerce, small items up to 2 kilos or 6.8 kilos worldwide to certain destinations, which is all dead weight and very competitive in price. Moving on to the prime side is the DHL Express side. So I used to work for DHL Express for a few years, and DHL Express is that time-sensitive delivery through road or by air worldwide. So worldwide, it relies on its own network, its own planes to make delivery to serviceable to 220 countries and territories worldwide. And that's for your time sensitive and your bigger movements, which perhaps may go into Amazon. Moving forward, we have DHL Global Freight Forwarding, and that's sort of the business which is in for freight, so larger aircraft movements and shipping, and these guys support bigger industry and also customers who require bigger stock movements being shipped into Europe or worldwide. DHL Supply Chain, whose purpose there is to support the supply chains of businesses. They did have a very much a big focus until recently on bigger businesses, so your Heinekens of the world, your Jaguar Land Rovers, your NHS supply chains, but in the last sort of 2 to 3 years, they've been focusing on the e-commerce side as well to support e-commerce multi-site supply chain pick and pack solutions. And then finally, DHL e-commerce, which is technically part of my division as well, and this is again a sort of an e-commerce solution worldwide up to around about 6.8 kilos deadweight billing, which kind of sits between that express side and the post side to offer something which is sort of a medium terms of a medium transit time of delivery. So within them 5 sort of big sectors, we aim to support overall global logistics for customers. And what we make sure we do is have the right people in each business. So we have experts within supply chain, within DHL Express, that time sensitive, within the e-commerce side of it, within post parcel in e-commerce, supporting different customers. So when you speak to someone at DHL, they're generally an expert in that field of logistics, because we don't like to think of ourselves as being a jack of all trade, knowing everything about logistics. A lot of our dinosaurs in our business do. But yeah, we put the right people in the right place to make sure you're well supported. And that's why we're so successful in terms of our brand. Next slide. So a bit about my division. So Deutsche Post is one of the big divisions of the Deutsche Post DHL group, and we support international and domestic mail for e-commerce delivery. So the type of customers we look for are sort of your Amazon sellers, your low weight under 2 kilos or under 10 kilos, where they need a very, very competitive price to compete with Amazon sellers, or the bigger brands, what you find in the UK and in Europe, where they're selling direct to consumers, where they have a large international growth. Or they're a customer of interest where we think they could have their potential growth if we give them that success in terms of good pricing. Like I said, we're the largest postal delivery company in Europe, and on a daily basis, we're delivering around about 61 million items in Germany alone every single day. So you can imagine the size of our network in terms of getting them deliveries super quick in Germany. It's very, very production and operationally led to make sure that we achieve a really good transit time and successful delivery in Germany. So, overall, we support businesses to provide that very cost competitive solution for e-commerce to ensure they grow international. And and people like AVASK, there's only a certain degree of where Deutsche Post can advise customers of when it comes to international compliancy, where it's to do with VAT or packaging requirements in terms of VAT and so on. We can only go so far for in our business. We know our business very well, but this is where AVASK can come in and advise and guide your business to be more compliant and ship better internationally as well. So it kind of goes hand in hand. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
I think from a perspective, if let's say a client were to use Deutsche Post to import from the UK into Europe, there are a couple of steps that that client would have to look at. One of which, customs declarations, is certainly something they would have to get familiar with. You know, creating a commercial invoice, a packing list, and potentially even the country of origin certificate, and all that would have to be ready at some point. Deutsche Post does offer customs brokerage as well, so they would essentially, if duty or VAT would apply, you'd pay them and they'll pay the customs authorities. But how the country then the question then rises: how do you know how much import VAT or how much duty you have to pay? And that's generally seen on a commercial invoice. The commercial invoice talks about exported details, imported details. If this is a movement of inventory, generally speaking, these would be very similar details because you put your UK address on both of these, and then also talking about maybe your UK VAT and your EU VAT, as well as your EORI numbers, which are essential. The delivery address is given, the Incoterms just determined until which point you're held liable for this movement, and different providers have different different preferences in terms of Incoterms. And then you just give a bit of information about your goods, sort of a description of, for instance, HS codes, which are pretty much like barcodes of your product, to determine exactly what they are, because on our custom softwares, that's what we'd use to then communicate with the customs authorities to say, okay, these types of products, we're looking to import these, and they'll be coming through this and that truck or mode of transport, essentially. But all of these are, the commercial invoice doesn't have to look exactly like this. This is just from a point of reference, just to have for you to have something to look at. There are different variations of them out there. We do have a couple of set procedures depending on which country you're looking to import to. I think today, if we just focus on one, purely thinking about time, because that, and if we focus from UK to DE, we'll also look at maybe from a broader perspective as to EU to UK later on as well. But from a UK's perspective, generally speaking, when a client is looking to make a shipment with DHL, what we would request is, you know, the airway bill, the template that we referred to earlier, just so that we can go through all of the information that's been provided, make sure that the HS codes, commodity codes, whatever is all correct. And then we would essentially communicate with DHL to say that we'll be acting as the so-called indirect representative to then assist with the transport of those goods. What this means, an indirect representative, is when this has been implemented also since Brexit, that if a UK incorporated company or any company incorporated outside Europe but wanting to import into Europe, they will need to appoint a legal representative, so to speak, to give the customs authorities someone who is within their jurisdiction. This person will be held jointly liable for all of your shipments. And generally speaking, you would appoint this person prior to import, so that that person would be able to communicate with yourselves and the transport agent to make sure that every party involved knows what's going on, and all the information provided is correct, and there are no further requirements at the point of import. This person might as well be your point of contact if you've got any questions regarding import. They would pretty much be up to date on all of the ins and outs. So if we then talk about maybe VAT deferral schemes, because there are a few in Europe, if you are or if you were to import through, let's say, the Netherlands, and you're wanting to, your end destination would be somewhere else in Europe, you would be making use of something called Article 23. And through this method, you would appoint a limited fiscal representative, so someone who takes on VAT liability for a certain amount of time, this usually being for the point of import, to take on, the import VAT, for instance, or anything that would occur there. This person would essentially defer, as they would have this Article 23 deferment license, defer your import VAT right until your goods have been received in the recipient country. So, for instance, in this scenario, if your goods were to deliver to DE, so Germany, but you're wanting to import through the Netherlands because you don't want to pay the import VAT, then that's certainly something you can look to arrange. So that would be one way of doing this. There are a few methods or a few accounting methods that you'd have to make use of, but that's certainly something we can look to advise you with, and also briefly give you a bit more of a broader understanding of this. If you're looking to have if you have any questions, we'll be happy to take them on a one-to-one basis as well. There are a few different postponed VAT methods out there as well, such as in France. There is a take-back system almost, or a reverse charge system, in which at the point of import, if you're looking to import into France, what they say is they will ask you to have or to postpone your payment of import VAT right until you do your filing in France. This allows for the French authorities to essentially say, okay, we recognize that you would have to pay this certain amount of money for import VAT. However, we would at this point also, grant you the certificate to state that we owe you this amount for import VAT. So essentially, it's more of a paper transaction. So you say, yes, I'm paying, and also, yes, I'm reclaiming. Therefore, there's no actual money that leaves your account. This usually is quite a popular option, and certainly something we see or hope to be implemented in different countries as well. From a European seller's perspective, if you're looking to sell into Europe, the requirements aren't very different. You've got your normal pre-alert documents, or your airway bill, commercial invoice, and all of that. You'd have someone who will reviews these import documents, and you'd have your customs broker who then liaises with the customs authorities should there be a need for it. Then also, if you have a requirement for an indirect representative, then that's certainly something you would look to set up. So the requirements aren't very different. Procedures are very much the same. The commercial invoice entails the same amount of information on there. But I think it will be always best to liaise with your transport provider, in this case DHL, to get the templates from them as well, if they have any set ones, and get as much information from them as possible. Similarly to the EU, the UK does have a deferral scheme as well. It's called postponed VAT accounting. And in this way, you would also just postpone your initial payment of import VAT right until the filing deadline. So just the same as it is in France. That's something you can register for. It's not automatic as it is in France. But the registration in itself, that's something you can talk about with your VAT agent, and they can certainly set that up for you. It's always important to notify all parties that are involved within this import that you are making use of the PVA scheme, or that you want to make use of the PVA scheme, so that you don't have to pay for it. If you do find yourself paying for import VAT, you do get the C79 certificate, which states how much import VAT you have paid in this, for instance, in this quarter. And then you would be able to reclaim that at your next filing period. So that's also fairly uncomplicated, but naturally it's money that you give out for someone else to hold instead of having that in your bank account. Usually that's quite good for cash flow purposes and a preferred way of import. So we briefly spoke about the requirements that you'd have to consider when importing. So there's legal representation, i.e. indirect representation, getting the customs broker, and we'll briefly talk about responsible person as well, and then also extended producer responsibility. And we'll talk about how a responsible person might be different to indirect representation or all of the previous points we've spoken about. So responsible person, essentially, that would be something that you'd see more of if you're dealing in the world of Amazon, if you're selling on Amazon, if you're selling cosmetic goods, if you're selling food items, if you're selling any of those or dangerous goods, you'd need someone there to do audits, to check that everything is correct and that you are compliant, essentially sort of checking the labels, having these purity statements. If you're looking to import cosmetics as well, you'd need a statement of non-animal testing. And that person would essentially make sure that you're all up to date on that as well. That's not something AVASK would deal with, but we do have connections to, connect you with someone to assist with that. So I think if we hand over to Ellie now, we'll be talking about EPR, as that is one of the newer requirements as well in Europe specifically, and soon the UK. I think that'll be a good idea.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Freddie. Yeah, let's dive straight into EPR. I think kind of EPR is a massive topic that's being spoken about at the moment, and it's something that maybe hasn't been out in the media, in the news, and it's just about educating people about what their liabilities now are as this new legislation that has come into play. So I think the kind of thing on everybody's lips at the moment is, what is EPR? What does it stand for? So EPR stands for Extended Producer Responsibility. And although it's a new thing for online marketplaces, it's a new thing for sellers, it's a new thing for providers to get involved with, it's not a new thing overall. It's a new legislation that's become now something that people have to deal with in terms of sales, but it's been around since the late 1980s. It's where chemical tax eventually evolved into, and it's kind of been hiding behind the scenes, but something's become more prevalent as we've come into 2022. So it essentially means that sellers, if you're selling into certain countries, now have to take responsibility for the goods they're putting onto the market, and then also their entire life cycle, including their eventual disposal. So what I mean by taking responsibility is, if you're considered a producer, which we'll cover a little bit later, you will then be required to pay these things called eco-contributions, which is essentially a fancy environmental term for taxation. It's a small taxation to fund the sustainable disposal of those products that you're putting onto the market. So where that differs from an actual taxation is this, these eco-contributions go back into the disposal of the products. So where that gap in the market has been, where there's the gap in funding in terms of actually responsibly disposing of these products, funding the sustainable repurposing and things like that of these items, that's where the money that you'll need to be paying goes back into. So under these updated regulations, each liable entity needs to be alleviating the environmental impacts that your products are having on the environment throughout their entire product life cycle. Next slide, please. So who does it cover and what does it cover? So I mentioned the word producer earlier, and that's where that kind of confusion is coming in almost straight away. So it's not just if you're producing the goods yourself. So if you're only the manufacturer, it's not just covering you. So under EPR regulations, you're considered a producer if you're firstly manufacturing a product subject to EPR requirements in the country in which it's relevant, if you're importing a product subject to these requirements into the country, or if you're selling a product subject to EPR requirements in these countries. So at the moment, it's only affecting those that are selling in the German and the French marketplaces. However, it is set to expand. So we're looking at I know Spain is looking to implement EPR at the beginning of 2023. The UK has just postponed theirs until the beginning of 2024 to focus more on the UK PPT, the plastic packaging tax that they've just brought in. But it's something that is not going away. It's something that's going to be expanding over the EU in the next kind of 5 to 10 years. So it's just starting in France and Germany at the moment. So if any of those 3 points apply to you, so if you're manufacturing in France and Germany, importing into either of those countries or selling in either of those countries, this is definitely something that you need to be taking into consideration when you're selling. So if you're considered a producer of these products in the scope of EPR requirements, you will be obliged to provide something called EPR registration numbers to your online marketplaces in order to show compliance. I know that online marketplaces are actively reaching out to sellers at the moment and ensuring compliance across the board. A lot of you have probably, if you're selling on Amazon are very heavy on pushing their compliance at the moment. So you've probably heard a little bit about this floating around. So it's definitely something that you need to be taking into consideration. Next slide, please, Freddie. Perfect, thank you. So when I talk about goods falling into EPR kind of requirements, we're talking about categories. So the way in which EPR works is in each country, they have different categories that your goods could fall under. And for each category, you will be required to register for a different registration number. So in France, they've gone for kind of an extensive list. They've got 9 categories in which your goods could fall under. So we've got packaging, electronic and electronic equipment, batteries, furniture, tires, paper, textiles, and they've added 2 new ones, which are chemicals and piercing medical equipment. They're always on the hunt for looking for more categories to add as well. So it's something that we need to be keeping our ears to the ground about what's coming up in the future. But this is what France is focusing on at the moment. And then Germany have chosen a more minimalistic approach, and they're going for just packaging, electronic and electronic equipment, and batteries. So if you have any goods that fall into any of these categories, this is something that we need to be focusing on. And I think on the next slide, we have an example of this. So here we have a product example. So if I'm selling mobile phones into France and Germany, I'll need 3 different EPR registration numbers in each country. So it's not just if I'm selling a phone, I'll just need electronic equipment registration. I will also be needing packaging, electronic equipment, and batteries. So if I'm selling into both marketplaces, overall, I will need 6 different registration numbers in order to be compliant on when I'm selling. So it's worth noting that if you are selling products, they might not just fall into one category themselves. The likelihood is that you will have a packaging liability. Most people have a packaging liability if you're selling into both of these countries, just purely because every single good is packaged in order to protect it. Moving on, please, Freddie. Perfect. So let's talk about the EPR contributions. So as I mentioned earlier, these are essentially your environmental taxations to fund the the sustainable disposal of the goods that you're putting onto the marketplace. So as a business that you're selling into either of these countries, or you're importing or you're manufacturing, you must pay these eco contributions to the relevant organization. So they're called PROs. They're essentially your EPR tax offices, and that needs to be paid in accordance with their reporting. So each category has potentially different reporting schedules, something that needs to be aware of. And then also these eco contributions are not defined by a set percentage. It's not like VAT where you know exactly what you're going to be liable to pay. It's based very much on the products themselves. So these payments are defined by the EPR product category that they fall into. So which category, so all of those 9 in France and then the 3 in Germany, the type of device that you're selling, the attributes of those products, and most importantly, the number and the weight of units sold within those EPR categories. So what we do is we look at the volume at which you're predicting to sell in 2022. This is at the point of registration. So we'd look at your predictions for 2022. You'd forecast what you think you're going to be paying in that year. We look at the volume at which you'll be putting onto those marketplaces, and then also the weight of those goods themselves. So let's, for example, take packaging, because that's most likely to affect everybody. So if we take packaging in France, for example, France, they tend to just look at the unit level for the eco contributions. However, the way in which they work this is they look at units on a component level. So for example, if I'm selling a face cream, I've got the pot the face cream comes in, I've got the lid, I've potentially got a protective seal, and then I've got a box that face cream comes in as well. So we're looking at them 4 units for one item, which is going into France. That's how they then calculate their contributions. So I would say, as a kind of estimate, if you're selling anything under 10,000 units onto the French market of packaging, then you're looking at around 80 euros as a contribution for the year. This is where it then differs with Germany. So with Germany, they're focusing very much on the volume at which you're selling, but also the weight and the material of the packaging as well. So for example, they take, say if you're selling 50 kilos of cardboard into Germany on an annual basis, that's going to be a lot cheaper than if you're selling 50 kilos of plastics, for example, because it's just easier to recycle, it's easier to repurpose. So that's the way in which the countries differ as well. Also, what Germany are doing is they're taking into consideration your secondary packaging too. So not just the packaging that you're putting your goods into, but also the packaging that your online marketplace are putting your goods into in order to transport your goods, the secondary packaging that DHL might use in order to transport your goods as well. That's something that needs to be taken into consideration when you're paying these eco contributions, all of which is done by AVASK. We have a service here that will be able to assist you in doing this. It's something that you're definitely not left in the dark on, because it can be quite confusing when submitting this information. Next slide, please, Rick. Perfect. So with everything, there are deadlines in place. So 1st of January 2022 saw the deadline come in for the 7 original categories in France. So that's all of the ones previously mentioned, excluding chemicals and piercing medical equipment, just because they came in slightly later. What online marketplaces, Amazon in particular, are currently doing is they're allowing a sort of grace period in order to allow people to get their registrations in. So they're very aware that this was kind of sprung on people very, very quickly at the end of 2021. So they're allowing that kind of grace period in order for people to get their registrations in. They are accepting late registrations, but I would highly advise to start now to avoid penalties. What they'll start doing is Amazon are currently paying the eco contributions on the behalf of sellers and then requesting that that is then remitted from sellers' accounts as well, potentially adding additional interest on top of that as well as kind of an administration fee. So it is in your interest to also register yourselves independently. And also then you've got it all under control at the same time as doing Germany as well. So speaking of Germany, 1st of July, which is not that far away at all, of this year will be the packaging deadline coming in for Germany. So any goods that you're selling into Germany or any goods that have the possibility to be sold to a client in Germany, if they're packaged, then they will need to be having an EPR registration number for packaging. The 1st of January 2022 also sees the electrics deadline coming in Germany as well. I wouldn't be surprised if batteries also follow suit for January 2023, just purely because they work off the same organisation. So although they haven't got a hard deadline for batteries at the moment, I wouldn't be surprised if that then pops up as well for January next year. What I would say about Germany is they're definitely not going to be as lenient as France. The German authorities are very strict on what they allow, especially with these new legislations coming in. So registration times are already increasing for the German registrations. You're looking at about a 12-week wait in order to register your electronics at the moment. So it's definitely something that you need to be taking into consideration. And also with July just around the corner, we need to make sure that you will be getting those packaging numbers. As I mentioned before, there's no sort of monetary penalties involved, but online marketplaces will be obliged to remove listings for non-compliance. So not just affecting your environmental legislation compliance, but also affecting your compliance overall. And it also means that your sales are then going to be majorly affected when you're coming to selling later down the line in Q3, Q4. We all know that it takes a long time for kind of online marketplaces to reactivate accounts and things like that. So it's just not worth risking when it comes to sort of new things on the market and stuff like that. So it's about knowing your products, knowing what categories that they fall into, and knowing where your liabilities lie. And as soon as you know that, then we have expert advice here, which we can definitely assist with. What I would say about EPR is, although it does seem like an additional hurdle, it seems like an additional step, an additional inconvenience perhaps in terms of selling, it's definitely something that is a positive thing in terms of sellers. It's creating a more sustainable future for selling and allowing us to kind of take responsibility for those goods that we're putting onto the market, and making sure that there is a financial kind of net, if you will, for those reprocessing, the sustainable kind of recycling of those goods themselves. Next slide, please.
Brilliant. I think that concludes it for today's webinar. I just wanted to give a brief overview as to how AVASK can maybe assist with shipments alongside with DHL's transport of goods and their brokerage. Yeah, we ourselves offer a wide variety of different VAT, customs and EPR solutions, even with incorporations, if that's something you're considering. All of our services, you'll have an account manager, so someone you can actually turn to, talk to, and freely consult with, just to talk about what might be required for you, what would be the best step, and also look at maybe entry requirements for different countries. Given that the current climate, it might appear a little bit much for someone who's a fresh starter, let's say. Just to give a brief overview as to what to expect, often does come in very handy. But yeah, maybe at this stage, I'd be happy to have a quick Q&A session, just to talk about just to answer some questions if you have any. Please do make use of the Q&A box so that the questions are recorded, and we can look to answer any unanswered questions via email after this webinar as well. And if you've got any questions directed at Luke, please say so in the chat. As a UK seller storing inventory in Netherlands, would it be possible to postpone import VAT when we move inventory to Netherlands? There is a method of doing this, but you wouldn't be using the example I mentioned in earlier today. It wouldn't be through this deferment license. There might be a different way in which we can direct or assist with in this case as well. So that's something we can look at specifically as well. If you're with us for VAT, if you turn to your account manager, then that's certainly something they can answer for you. When I shipped to Amazon Germany, it was returned because DHL wanted a name and contact at Amazon facilities. So how can you help? So there might be a few things that could have gone wrong there. Specifically with imports into Germany, as the customs authorities are rather strict, they might have actually referred to an indirect representative of some kind, just to make sure that your products, that you've got someone there at border for you, and appointing those possibly in a timely manner would be very good as well. Just so, if there should be any issues, they can liaise with the customs authorities, as they tend to only hold products for around 10 days, I believe, before they send them back or destroy them. But yeah, that's something we would look to advise with. And we've also got a question regarding transport times from UK to DE. I don't know, Luke, would you have an oversight into that, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So depending on the method of shipping, so if you was using DHL Express, you're looking at about 1 working day, so next day service, as long as that's received before 3 o'clock, depending on your local depot. With Deutsche Post, we monitor our transit times quite every day because the volume of orders. We're looking at around about 2.2 days from when you're sending the item to having it delivered in Germany. That's the average out of many, many thousands of orders. So yeah, transit time is pretty good from the UK at the moment due to the high service level within, well, operational standard within Germany. In fact, one thing we have done this year has put a lot of focus and pressure within our network in Germany to improve the service. So we was trying to get a certain percentage, we exceeded that, and now we're going for something quite ambitious, which I can't really mention, to try and get more and more items delivered on a next day basis in the very high 90% mark. So yeah, performance in Germany from the UK is extremely good, but it all depends on your method of shipping, whether that's DHL Express, whether that's an e-commerce postal solution, or whether that's a freight solution.
Very interesting. Okay, and from we've got another question directed at DHL, asking which destination country, comparing France and Germany, which country would be easier as a point of import?
Majority, it depends on where the items are coming from, but the majority of our customers who are shipping, say, from the UK into Europe to then inject into Amazon DE or FR, generally gets their items custom cleared within Liège, Belgium, or the Netherlands. But it really depends on cost, volume, and other factors of where you are based. So yeah, the majority of customers, they will import into the Netherlands or into Liège first and use a custom brokerage solution to clear the items, and then on forward it into Germany or France. And that's just down to commercials. It can be a lot cheaper to do that. Although some companies will now directly import into Germany, custom clear it with the direct record of importer, and then inject into our hub at DHL, Deutsche Post, or Amazon. Yeah.
And we've got Matthew Allen asking, following on from the question relating to being asked for Amazon contact details, we had the same problem and we're having deliveries rejected because we had the name Amazon in the delivery contract address. We're advised to give our company name and address line followed by CO FBA. This seemed to help. Yes, that is correct. So if you're looking to ship to an Amazon FBA, if you keep your own company name on their CO with the FBA reference or with the FBA delivery address, then that's certainly something as well as customs authorities are looking for. That is correct. Thank you very much for raising that. Then we've got someone asking, I need a UK responsible person for my product. Do you also offer this, and how is the price? So this is not something we offer directly, but I can certainly look to point you towards one of our partners who do offer this service. And they would then look at your product specifically to directly advise you as to what kind of costs you'd look at and what could possibly incur. So if you do maybe reach out to us with our emails on the slide presentation, then I can look to direct you towards that person. Then we've got Katie asking if AVASK is already acting as our indirect representative for another shipper. For example, OSS, does that mean that we also have covered with DHL or other shippers, and how does that cost charged by DHL? As I know, OSS include that within their fee and their pallet costs. Yeah, so we do, you're not tied to one shipper if you're using us as an indirect representative. We work with a variety of transport agents. I would say around sort of 95% of the transport agents out there, we're more than happy to work with. They are the odd ones that can be proving a little bit challenging. But for instance, if you're looking to use DHL, then yeah, certainly. We've got an ongoing procedure with them, and that's working very well. Specifically, also if you're shipping into FBAs, that's something we can definitely advise on. And in terms of costs charged, that is true. So that those fees wouldn't be included within the transport or pallet costs that would occur. These would be separate. But yeah, if you maybe reach out to us, I'd be happy to go through pricing with you directly, and then offer you a bit more tailored pricing structure rather than just a flat fee, so to speak. I think from my side, that's all of the questions we have at the moment. We'll wait a couple more minutes to see, and if not, I think that would also be a good place to stop. Okay, yeah, maybe in the meantime, if I can direct your attention to also the Online Hustle. This is a book we tend to recommend on all of our webinars purely because it does cover sort of just general tips and tricks to selling online on online marketplaces. So for any new starters or even sort of established sellers, that's something that I would recommend just having maybe a flick through to see, as I find you're always able to learn more if you read. Yeah, I think that would pretty much sum this webinar up. And Luke has sent his email address at the beginning of this webinar. If you do have any questions for him specifically, please feel free to reach out to him. He's incredibly responsive, certainly to me calling him all the time, especially when it's not the best times, but here we are. So yeah, thank you very much for attending, everyone. And special thanks to Luke for joining, and Ellie. Thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you very much.